Now it is the turn of the men to take on a course that is as tough as you could possibly imagine. It's a spectacular place, this nation. If you ever get a chance to visit, then do so. You will not be disappointed. The land of 1,000 hills, they say. Well, we're playing with 3 of them today. The men's time trial about to get off and underway. We're in Kigali, of course, and as you can see from the mirror-like lake here, there's virtually no wind at all. Some would describe it, not even a kitten's cough. No, we are taking on 40.6 kilometers of road racing here. Against the clock, of course, and to finish us off, and maybe some ambitions as well, will be found wanting or indeed missing when we get to the Côte de Kimihurura. It's cobbled, can you believe it? It has ramps of 11%. It comes right at the end of the run, and it is quite simply cruel. It's also highly entertaining. The fans have turned out en masse. They're loving what they've seen so far. And just check this out. This is how, indeed, it has panned out. Remco Evenepoel, twice a winner of this great race. In fact, wearing those rainbow bands with pride, of course. He'll be last to go off, maybe for an historic treble. Let us wait and see. Evenepoel was king of the hill when we came to Zurich. Well, it seems that factoring in some rises and falls as well as technical sections are of no consequence to this man. When he's in the mood, he's on course, and more often than not, you think, finishes up as world champion. Well, he's carried the bands on for the last 2 years, and quite frankly, even though he's moderated his Royal Marines haircut, he is determined to power his way in battle and deliver once again. He'll go off last. His problem is that he follows the mighty Tadej Pogačar, who is well rested after deciding not to take on La Vuelta and just save himself up for this. Let's see. Stefan Kung is here as well. We have the likes of Jay Vine, who spectacularly so had a sensational Vuelta, a race, as we've said, that Tadej decided to miss. Let's see how they go head to head, because Jay Vine himself is on amazing form when it comes to the time trial. This is our playground, Kigali. In one of the most populous nations in all of Africa, we are having some fun, but just look at this course. There's a dead turn in the southernmost section of it. We then come and we play with the Nyanza mountain once again. We do that twice. Then we go to the Côte de Péage and indeed back to the Kimihurura with the cobbles, and then our day will be done. This is going to hurt. It's also going to be great. We thank our UCI commissaires panel for indeed overseeing what has already been an enormous success, and we've only just started. We've had the most wonderful women's time trial. Now, though, it is about to get underway with the men in about 6 minutes' time. First off the ramp will, of course, be a Rwandan. They are our hosts, and in fact, a decent benchmark was set when in the women's race when Nieri actually sat in the hot seat for quite some time before, of course, it was ultimately going elsewhere. We won't spoil that by telling you the result, just in case you want to watch that on catch-up on the UCI website. In the meantime, feast your eyes on what we have to deal with. We'll be starting off with ISIGANWA of Rwanda. We have so many nations represented: Tanzania, South Sudan, Sierra Leone, Mali, Senegal. And that's only your top 6 riders, for goodness sake. It is a panoply of colour and indeed entertainment. First big name that we will be waiting for, I think, will probably be Florian Vermeersch of Belgium. He will be coming off in around about half an hour's time, but it gives us plenty of time to look at this amazing nation. Artem Nish as well will be hoping for something glorious. But we will, of course, get to the pointy end ultimately. And that's where you're going to hear names like Leknesund, like Barter, like Heidemann, like Arnsman, like Seixas, Schmidt as well, of course, Van Wilder, Rafferty's here, Tadej Pogačar, as I mentioned, Remco Evenepoel, Jay Vine, Bruno Amarai, Isaac Del Toro. I mean, these are superstars we're going to be playing with shortly. We cannot wait. My name's Carlton Kirby. Thank you so much for your company. Sitting alongside me is Rebecca Charlton. We have already had so much fun, possibly too much. We're a bit giddy. But we are now waiting for the men's event to get underway. Swapping 31.2 kilometres in the women's race for 40... I'll double check this because that's what I'm paid for. 40.6 kilometres. I nearly gave you the Zurich distance, but don't worry. I'm a professional. Kigali is where we are. Are they in safe hands? I think so. This has been a brilliantly organised day of racing so far. And it is the men's elite individual time trial next.
Well, firstly, an absolute pleasure to be sat alongside you today in commentary, Carlton. As the listeners can tell, the viewers at home know that we've already had plenty of laughs today. We won't give massive spoilers in case people didn't tune in for the women's action. But what it did do was tell us a lot about the course ahead of the men's elite time trial today. We have many, many question marks as to how people would fare on this time trial, and well, it hasn't disappointed so far today.
It certainly has not. In this beautiful land, it may well be landlocked, but there's plenty of water here. Freshwater fish as well. I remember once ordering a fish at a restaurant, and then suddenly getting really worried because we were many thousands of kilometres away from the coast. And I was thinking, how fresh is this fish going to be? And of course, it was absolutely fresh. It had been landed from a lake. I'd completely forgotten about freshwater fish. That's what Rebecca's having to deal with today. That level of misguidance.
I'm a vegetarian, I'm afraid.
Not even a pescatarian?
No, I spent a little bit of time as a pescatarian, and now I'm just a full vegetarian.
Yes, there we are.
There we are. There's a fact of the day.
There we are. I tried being a pescatarian, and then I thought, well, you know, ducks, they're on the water, aren't they? They're nearly in the water. And then, of course, all the other animals that come to the water hole. So that's some of them as well. Meanwhile, it's time to go racing. We start off in this magnificent stadium, and in fact, where are the drummers? Maybe they're just having some treatment for an RSI to their wrists. You'll understand when you see them getting off and underway. The riders, several things to worry about out there. Burst left ear drummers, they go by the drummers, which will be sparking up in a short while. The atmosphere is always absolutely at the max. And if you're wondering why those empty seats, they're just outside. They've basically just seen the women's race. They've gone out to get themselves a brief snack, which are fantastic here, by the way. And now we are going to welcome, as you can hear, the roars have already started. Shero ISIGANWA is about to get off the ramp. He's going to be counted in first. He opens the course for us today, which will give you a great view of the technical nature of the entree. Some to the drummers.
You've been really concerned about them, haven't you?
All
morning so far, because you were worried that their time splits, they weren't going to keep them up. But no, the sense of occasion here is understandably absolutely huge. And as we just see our first rider of today's elite men's time trial get underway down that start ramp, I think it's just worth noting the arena that this is set in, because it's allowed the crowds to just really form around that inside venue to appreciate what this means today for the sport. And this is the first time, of course, that we've seen the UCI World Championships go to Africa at all. And as we start to see the crowds lining the roads, we can see the impact that this is having and the inspiration factor here today, and the amount of riders that will start early on today that are getting a real opportunity to compete on a world stage here, and it really matters.
It certainly does. It's wonderful. Our hosts here have been absolutely magnificent, and indeed we wait for, I just love the name Boniface. He's coming off fairly soon off the ramp. It's Boniface Ngwata from Tanzania is next. I bet he's got a smile on his face. It's possibly going to be a grimace by the end of the day, because this is serious stuff. What will be our timescale by the end of the day? It's hard to say, to be honest. We have a whole sequence of climbs. We go and we visit the Nyanza climb on 2 occasions. So out, down to a dead turn, come back, do it again, but from the opposite direction. And indeed, both tests are pretty sterling, I've got to tell you. We've noticed all of the riders, no matter what their qualities and grade, really starting to know that they're on a serious climb. We're talking gradients actually maxing out during this day of around about 11%. That stings, and especially when you factor in cobbles as well along the way, you know that you've had a big old test. They're going off at 2.5-minute margins. So first underway is our Rwandan hero. And as you can see, the party is still in full swing. Our drummers are back. They've missed, unfortunately, sending off Shema up the road, but they are here and ready to beat out a rhythm for this man. Well, it's all quiet. Got to hear the beeps. Well, we heard one of them. That was good. The drummers are here, and Ngwata has departed. They're all where they need to be. Unfortunately, they missed their friend, Shemu. He didn't... Well, I mean, his benefit is that his eardrums are still absolutely where they need to be. But Ngwata now needs to dig in deep. And we've noted as well that some of the riders here will be aboard road steeds, others on certainly more focused time trial machines, but take nothing away from the effort and indeed the input that they will be putting into this ride. This is big news for every single one of these early runners.
It really is, and it's really worth talking a little bit about the tech that we're going to see on show. And it's always exciting for tech geeks like myself. I don't know about you, Carlton, but I do love a TT day and exploring the options that riders have available to them. And we are going to see a contrast in times to date, but we're going to see a big contrast in the technology available to these riders and the setup in terms of whether people are in a full TT position with a very customized bike for the merits of using it today, and people that are going to be on a more standard road bike setup because they simply don't have that structure around them to provide enough funding to really drill them in with a TT position. As you say, there's riders in this field, and indeed in the women's earlier today, that are for the first time getting exposed to a world championships at this level of UCI racing. And it's so important for the development of riders in this part of the world. And Team Africa Rising has sort of formed from what was originally a Rwandan-based cycling team initiative, and then it expanded across different parts of Africa to really develop under 23 and junior riders to get to the top level of cycling. And they can't get there if we don't go through steps of riders getting exposed to this level, getting the experience, maybe having to field a race with a standard road bike setup. And we're seeing the sport evolve in Africa and get better and better with riders able to come into being fed to the higher echelons of the peloton.
Jalal Edouard is next for South Sudan. You know, the panoply of nations that we've got here is absolutely outstanding. It's so wonderful as well that we have come to Africa for the first time, the biggest continent on the planet, and just so very special for us to be here. And indeed, able to welcome so many different nations as well that haven't had perhaps the expense of leaving the great continent and have allowed themselves the honour of actually coming and competing. So we're going to see a whole panoply of different levels potentially of performance, but don't read too much into that, at least in the early phase, because it's an absolute honour to witness them racing and it will be big news for everybody back home. Of course, this man from Tanzania hasn't come as far as some others, and of course Shemo Nissan Yumwi, who went off earlier on, our national champion of Rwanda, given the honour of opening the race for us today. And here he is, just 35.4 kilometres to go. It's a long day.
The singer Yumba here. Yeah. Sorry, Carlton. Sorry. Yeah, he's been the first off on the start ramp, and it's an interesting one because I can only imagine the sense of occasion, the pressure on your shoulders, the balance, I guess the fine balance of knowing that this is so special, you want to absorb it in this part of the world, being a Rwandan cyclist, being first off, but equally we know how brutal for the women's race, we've seen it, we know how brutal this course is and how much focus it takes, and so yeah, it's not one that this rider will be able to absorb fully at the moment, but reflecting on how amazing today has been is going to be something for later. But yeah, we had a lot of questions answered because we'd seen riders out there covering recons of the course on social media, but I think it was only when we saw the women at race pace that we realised that there were more elements perhaps to contend with than we had considered on paper.
Well, this is Ibrahim Jallo of Sierra Leone. I've got to say, I really like this kit. It's kind of colour block in the old look kind of way. I absolutely love it. UCI, of course, it's about all bike disciplines. It's not just about time trialling and road racing, although that is our focus. Even virtually, it is, of course, an homage as well as our great overriding institution that looks after, it's the crucible really, if you like, of all forms of bike racing. So whatever it is you like to do on two wheels, or occasionally three, you found your home right here with the UCI. UCI, all bikes, all competition, for everybody. How lovely is that?
I know you did as well, of course, Carlton, but I had the pleasure of being involved in the Super Worlds when it came to Glasgow in Scotland, and I think that montages like that give me such goosebumps now because I was at the heart of every discipline that week, and I think it just hit me how vast this sport is and what we have going on in it and how it transcends cycling, inspires more and more people to get active, and it's a really special thing. We're in a good place in the sport.
And we're in a good place here, the Volcanoes National Park. It's absolutely beautiful, best known for its endangered mountain gorillas. Yes, an unparalleled opportunity you will get to go and witness those beautiful, powerful yet gentle creatures. And in fact, if you pay to have yourself a guide, you will get closer than perhaps you could even begin to imagine was possible to those amazing creatures. Time then to get ourselves into the zone, and this man, Diarra, is of course representing Mali. I've got to say, when you come to a Worlds, the choice of kits, when you get national jerseys and national representation up for grabs, stripped out of sponsorship, there's a purity about it, and there's some amazing designs. And every single one that comes to the podium here, I'm thinking, I wonder if they do treble XL.
Well, I have been looking at a lot of the potential technology that we're going to see displayed today, and I think it's a really good talking point actually, is when we see riders obviously go from their trade team kit into what we'll see them representing today in terms of their national kit. And each rider has different kit, of course, available to them depending on what national team they're riding for. And some riders will have been putting in endless hours of development in aero testing, in knowing exactly how their kit's going to perform. And as we discussed with the bike setup, some of our earlier starters today, there might be a big discrepancy in the kit that's been available to them, even if they have a skin suit or not. So I think as we get further and further on in today's proceedings, it's going to become more of a talking point as to who's developed their own kit for today, which riders have been allowed by their federation to say this is exactly what I want. And of course a large part of that is down to funding as well, which we'll see big discrepancies in again today. But the important point being, as you made earlier, Carlton, is the representation we're seeing today is really, really significant.
Well, we've got quite a playground for you today. World Championships individual time trials, occasionally they're quite simple courses. I think the simplest we ever had was actually in Qatar. You know, take a pancake, iron it, play billiards on it. That was the kind of surface we were dealing with. This is anything but. It's not unheard of to have climbs, but when you have this level of altitude gain within such a short distance, it is something quite exceptional. We are indeed playing with about 500 meters of altitude gain in this men's individual time trial, and some of the peaks are really, really sterling, to say the very least. We're playing with those peaks, and of course wherever there are peaks there are troughs as well, so there are fast sections, there are climbs. It's very difficult to set a rhythm for those, say for the drummers of course, who are doing a brilliant job, for those within the run. It's not necessarily for the pure time trialists, which has meant that there are some who've decided that this is not going to be their game to play. There's no Filip Ogana here, for example. Primož Roglic has decided not to come along. I think to their detriment, to be honest, because bizarrely, I think it might have suited them.
I feel like, I mean, it's very easy to say, isn't it? Oh, it's unpredictable. We say that a lot in cycling, but truly today has been so hard to predict and hard to navigate for the riders in terms of pacing it. And not only because of the course, but we are operating at an altitude of 1,500 metres, and a lot of the riders reported back, including the likes of Domi Vollering, that the air quality was affecting whether or not riders were able to go into the red and recover from that. So we've had reports that, you know, there's so many elements that riders are climatising to today. And I think because of that, no one really could call it coming into today as to who it was ultimately going to play in the favour of. But yeah, I think when we look at the likes of Filip Ogana, you expect him to field a time trial. People want him to, of course. So there are some big names missing from the list today. But that said, we have some pretty handy names that are going to be going off later today. But it is going to be fascinating because you have your out-and-out favourites, but anything can happen on this course. I think we've played down the elevation.
I love being here. The people are beautiful, the weather's amazing, and I think it's so special for them to have this race, and we can really feel that. So absolutely stoked to be here. Yeah, it's tough. There's not a lot of recovery, and there's a hell of a lot of climbing. I think if you think back to the tour when we had the uphill TT or the mountain TT, this course has got the same amount of climbing as that. So it's absolutely brutal. The downhills are rapid, the roads are as good a roads as you've ever ridden on. So it's going to be an absolutely flying rapid course and a very hard one. Look, I think it's about doing the best power I can, the best average speed, and seeing where that lands. I think I know what I'd be happy with in terms of power and speed at the finish line, and if I can get close to what I want, then you can't do much more than that, can you? So, but hopefully, I think if I can do what I'm aiming for, it should be competitive.
Fantastic. It's good that Luke Plapp's gone for an aero haircut as well, I noticed. Something I've been sporting for quite some time, but anyway. We just saw Ahmed Bedreddin Wais, who is part of the refugee Olympic team, originally from Syria. And wonderful to see that there is that representation as well. It's about spreading the love of cycling. And of course, the UCI have indeed brought cycling to Africa. Not that it wasn't here already. The Tour of Rwanda, very well established as on the UCI calendar, but for the World Championships to come here, as you can see from the fans, this has gone down so well with absolutely everybody. The nation are agog, and look at the way, we mentioned it during the women's race as well, the faces follow the riders. I absolutely love that. This is a treat for absolutely everybody, including ourselves. And this is Ibrahim Majolo just about to catch here Jalal Edouard, who looks to be labouring just a little bit, the rider from South Sudan, on the climb here. You can see that even at the moment we're looking at right now, you can see the differences in the kit and indeed what is available to the athletes in terms of funding. But this is something that the World Championships help to even out over time, just bringing the news of cycling really to everybody.
Completely, and you've got to start somewhere with that development process, and that's why we keep nodding to the fact that this is really, really important. And as you say, it's not just different styles on the bike, it's different setups, it's different kit availability. It's just night and day for some of these riders, but gaining this experience, coming onto this world stage, is what we're ultimately talking about. And we mentioned that we're missing the likes of Ghana, but within this field, there's so many talking points, so many stories. And you were talking there about the Olympic refugee team. And yeah, we have got all these stories that we're now talking about in our sport that we otherwise wouldn't be. And we're shining a spotlight on that.
We are. And indeed, it doesn't need a spotlight to be shone on this amazing country. Just make sure you try it out. It's absolutely wonderful. Time then for the departures to continue, and they're coming off thick and fast right now. 14:02 local time. This is Mohamed Fia Handsoa of Malaysia, and indeed we have Guinea-Bissau who will be represented in Madagascar, I beg your pardon. We have Guinea-Bissau coming off shortly, and then the Comoros Islands. Do you know, all it does is prove to me what a global phenomena cycling is. It's a way of binding people together. It's also the most spectacular canvas upon which to paint the best of a nation, and that's what we are seeing here in Rwanda. It is a beautiful place and an impeccably well organised, indeed, World Championships. Yes, it's a nation that historically has had its troubles, but then again, you could say that about any country. There was, of course, the genocide in 1994. Since then, money globally has poured into this part of the world. And as you can see, the infrastructure is impeccable. The roads are brilliant that we are playing with, and the welcome of the people here has just been exceptional. It feels like Africa is kind of putting an arm around cycling rather than the other way around. And for that, we are grateful. This has been wonderful so far. Great experience. And the racing is going to get absolutely white hot. Rebecca's already mentioned the names that are indeed about to grace us. Florian Vermeersch will be the first sort of major name, I am sure, that some of you know about. The Belgian will be off the ramp in about 20 minutes' time. And then at the end of a long, hard run, you get to have yourself a nice cup of tea. And these are the tea growing areas of Rwanda, introduced at the turn of the last century. I believe it was by the Germans, quite frankly, who somehow managed to find some tea plants in India and then decided to export those and set up their own growing sections here. Tea cultivation full and proper, once the plants had been truly developed, didn't happen until just after the Second World War, 1952 in fact. And now it's one of the major tea producers in the world. So obviously there's China, there's India, Ceylon, some would wager. Tea in all kinds of parts of the world, but in Rwanda you get a very, very nice hearty brew. And it's a heady brew that we've got right now. The atmosphere inside the BK Stadium just heralding yet another departure. It's been a party all day, this.
It's been such a huge party. And as I mentioned earlier, I love the way that the start ramp is structured in the middle of that indoor arena, because it's just allowing that sense of occasion to be amplified here in Rwanda. And you mentioned the Tour of Rwanda and how important that has been. And we're also aware of that. And I think if you look at the crowds that line the roads for that race every year, and then you look at today, it's amplified even more. And it's evident that these crowds are so invested in watching the racing, and we've seen that all day so far. And I'm really enjoying that element and the celebration that is going on today in Rwanda for these championships.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a really binding event, this, and the build-up has been tremendous. I mean, even years ago when it was first announced that we would be bringing this to Rwanda, the government and indeed the people of this great nation have been coalescing really and just making sure that they are ready to welcome it. And even various border conflicts that have been bedeviling this part of the world have quietened and indeed been resolved apparently. And I like to feel that just as the Olympics as well itself likes to regard itself as a peacemaking opportunity, that cycling and the UCI World Championships have delivered something similar here in this amazing country, where the main characteristic is the sheer friendliness of the locals, and you can see it. The beaming faces is just brilliant. So we're here to enjoy ourselves and trust you are as well. Let's hear from Paul Seixas, shall we? Who, of course, will be going off a little bit later. He's one of our favoured riders today, very accomplished in his own right, and I am certain that he's going to deliver something special. He could easily get a top 5, Paul Seixas. Expectation.
C'est sûr que c'est particulier, niveau culturel, c'est bien différent de chez nous. Mais après, franchement, moi, je me suis préparé pour ça, donc ça me dérange pas tellement. Le climat est finalement peut-être un peu moins différent de ce que je pensais. Donc franchement, je me suis assez vite adapté. On verra, mais ouais, voilà, c'est une minute au final.
Climate may be a little different to what he was expecting, but he says he's adapted very quickly and he's very much looking forward to the run. Adapting to the climate may well indeed hamper a few, although the temperature of the day just ebbing ever so slightly. We've been averaging around about 27. Now, there are storm clouds gathering, but they are away from indeed the course for the time being. I'm just hoping it stays dry for everybody. We've had almost a pre-storm, kind of feels like pre-monsoony really. It's a dry season this, so rain not particularly expected. You might see some of the fronds of the palms here as you look past the crowd here at the cumulonimbus that are starting to gather. We may have some rain later, but I think the course itself is going to avoid that. The only problem is that as you get cumulonimbus forming over some of the hills, you get a draft being drawn in, and that can indeed just add a little bit of wind to a factor later on. So it might be, if that wind does pick up later, that it hampers some of the late riders. Let's see. Maybe that will just be an equalisation really, because the highest quality will of course be coming off towards the end. Let's see.
Well, let's see indeed. Shemu Nsengimba is the rider that we have eyes on at the moment for Rwanda, of course, and he was the first to set off on that start ramp in that beautiful start arena with all that crowd support, which indeed continues for him for every kilometre of the action, with all the fans lining the roads here. We talked about how special this is, but yeah, I just can't say enough what this moment will mean to this rider as an individual, and for everybody on looking on this day and this historical day for the UCI World Championships. And yeah, a solid performance so far, and we're very likely going to see him take to that hot seat at the conclusion of his ride today.
Well, earlier on we had Zavarine Niere, and she was in the hot seat for quite some time. She really set a belting pace out there, and I am sure that ISIGANWA will do pretty much the same. Meanwhile, next off is Ricardo Sogedi from Benin. Benin also famous for drummers, actually. I'm waiting to see a Tongan or a Samoan. Have you ever heard Samoan drums?
I'm not sure.
That's something, I tell you. Hollowed out trees, and they make one heck of a noise.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably not then.
Well, I spent a lot of time in the South Pacific, as you found out yesterday.
I did.
Yeah. we are. I haven't seen a Tuvaluan representative yet, but it'll happen. I was once responsible for forming the Tuvaluan beach volleyball team. Yeah, tried to get them in the Commonwealth Games.
Wow.
You know, my sporting credentials are planetary. Anyway, not interplanetary, not yet. We'll see. First football match on Mars, that's what I'm after. Anyway, we are indeed digging deep right now, as you can possibly tell. But our rolling terrain is now being revealed to us. Now, this is a long run. I'm expecting that we may well start to nudge the hour mark by the time we get to the end. That is a hell of a long time to stay in position on a time trial bike and to have the imposition of climbs, cobbles, inclines. Quite frankly, the crowd is absolutely wonderful, but you're going to go into a very, very dark tunnel indeed in terms of pain and effort that you've got to put into this.
Yeah, it's really, really tough today, and it was interesting to get the insights from Luke Plapp earlier on, wasn't it? It's his interview that we had the pleasure of seeing, and yeah, just giving his honest appraisal and summary of what he thinks lies ahead today. Of course, a lot of these riders will have done extensive recons when they arrived, and we now know how many resources teams and riders have even before setting sights on a course. We have the likes of VeloViewer, where we can really hone in on what's going to lie ahead for the riders. But yeah, he, I think, said pretty much it's going to be brutal. 40.6 kilometres, 681 metres of elevation gain. So a lot is being thrown into this World's course this year.
Well, it's designed to be tough. Now, China in the women's race also produced some great performances, and I'm expecting pretty much the same because, quite frankly, when China get invested in a sport, they don't really let it go until they have target achievements, and I'm sure that Zhankun Liu will be one of those. He is bound to go strongly. I'm just looking down the roster. I think China have actually come with just one representative. Yes, indeed. So it's all upon his... Sure, I beg your pardon. We have Hayoyu Sao going off a little bit later on. This is the Akagera National Park, where you get the Big Five. Do you know what the Big Five are? It's not 5-star. That was a long time ago. And since their last hit, it's been a while. But here, yeah, the Big Five are rhinos, lions, elephants, running out now, giraffes, there we are, and buffalo. I remembered them all. That's an achievement in itself. I always wonder about buffalo.
I never doubted you.
Are they one of the Big Five? They are here, apparently.
I'll let you answer that.
I'd have gone crocodiles. Something like that. But anyway, you know, I mean, buffalo, yes. Crocodile, ooh, you know. Anyway, back to it. 19.5 kilometres before he gets home. That's got to hurt. I mean, you've already emptied yourself on the race. You are, what, getting on for half an hour into your run. You've still got 19 kilometres with the worst part at the end in terms of effort that you're going to have to put in. That's cruel.
It's really interesting to look at the pacing of riders today, and something else to observe as we go on through our start list today is how much riders are able to keep time trial position as well, keep in the skis and keep aero, because again there's a big variation in who's able to have the time to prepare sitting in that ultimate position for this duration with this elevation. And of course, as we get towards the latter starters, we'll see more and more riders able to hold position a little bit longer. But it is really interesting to look at the Côte de Nyanza and the elevation of that, because although we're looking at averages of around 6% on some of these climbs, they do top out at 11%. So as Luke Plapp was saying, yeah, there's a significant amount of inclines today.
Here is Ahmed Weiss for the refugee Olympic team. Went very strongly in the Asian Games, finished in 9th place in the road race, and has indeed competed in so many events on behalf of refugees and the Refugee Council. And all credit to him, proving that through sport you can overcome all kinds of things that life throws at you. And, you know, so wonderful that he is here.
It's really wonderful. He began cycling at 14 years old, and I'm just looking down the list of his palmares, and yeah, he represented the Olympic refugee team at the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo, of course, and he's competed in 6 editions of the UCI Road World Championships. And yeah, he started at a young age, but of course had a very troubled, difficult journey. So the fact that he is here racing today is important, and it is the stories that come out of our beautiful sport that we need to keep shouting about.
We certainly do. And Segiyuma is here on course, and with 2.5-minute margins, he should stay clear. Edward Jalal of South Sudan will probably have something to say about that, but let's wait and see. We've seen Hassan Sharif of Tanzania completing the Tanzanian, indeed, input at the beginning, as Ngwata is already on course. Next up, Laurent Gervais of Canada will be off the ramp. In fact, I think he may well have just departed. Dick Dormout is also going to take to the podium. I think it is our Canadian friend, actually, that's just about to get off and underway. Backpedaling, that's a way of keeping your legs moving without moving. Laurent Gervais representing Canada, another phenomenal nation, I should say. And they've got phenomenal nature, of course. Canada is also a nation that punches above its weight, particularly in track cycling, and indeed brings it to the road occasionally as well. Remember the great win of rider Ejidal in the Giro d'Italia, which warmed the cockles of my heart, I must admit. Lovely guy, and never met a Canadian I don't like. I mean, there's probably a few I wouldn't like, but I haven't met them yet.
You've yet to meet them.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Unsung Gyuma is still out there and doing a job of opening the course for us. He's going to set our benchmark for us.
Yeah, Shemu Nsengiyumba is out front. He will presumably take to the hot seat as the first rider off on the ramp this morning. This afternoon? We're in the afternoon, aren't we? Yeah. Let me just check my time of day. Yeah, so of course he was the starter for our elite men's time trial, and yeah, the timing 0.1, so the first split, the gap was 1:45. So he's going to look to ride into that hot seat, and yeah, it will be a really big moment for this rider, and he's still at the head of that course.
Well, I'm just passing by the Kigali Genocide Memorial, which of course is a solid reminder of just what a dark place humanity can go to. But this nation has turned itself around absolutely amazingly, and is now a very hospitable and beautiful place to come. As I said, all nations have had their dark moments. It's how you move away from them that indeed is the mark of a great country, and that is what we have here. Fabulous place that we are absolutely loving, enjoying, while of course acknowledging those who have passed. Well, as the eternal flame burns for those who have passed, right now it's the moment of truth for some of these riders. Slightly upright positioned for to be on a time trialing bike, but maybe like a spinnaker, he's going to indeed catch the wind. and head through. The breeze is just starting to pick up ever so slightly, and it might well be slightly impactful as we get deeper into the day. But for now, those who are opening the course have got a free run, a free hand. I'm hoping that our benchmark times, the timing point 1, has indeed been breached by this man, and he's quickest so far. And I've got to tell you, of the 7 riders who come through, by a handsome margin, 1:45 quicker than the nearest rider to him. So ISIGANWA, they've put some very, very good riders, Rwanda, out first, just to give us a proper benchmark and get a look at them on the hot seat. I reckon he's going well.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen this, haven't we, early on in the women's elite race and indeed the men's, with ISIGANWA just putting in a really solid ride here. And so he's obviously just gone past the second checkpoint, so the only rider to have gone through the first 2. But as you say, the time gap's significant, as we saw him at timing point 1. So we're seeing riders scale the Côte de Nyanza today, then descend, do a dead turn and come back up again on the other side with, of course, a different gradient and a different approach to that summit. So there is a lot of climbing to contend with today, and it's perhaps had even more of an impact than we first thought. And there's a lot of riders looking at that 681 metres of climbing, and of course having to consider exactly how they pace that coming into those time splits. And I think the narrative enhances throughout the day, of course, with more and more riders setting off on that start ramp, as to how individual riders are planning their race, because we can't always tell, of course, can we, in the early checkpoints, whether somebody is going to have a part of the course that favours them more to pull it back, for example. And in the latter part of this course today for this TT, and we'll get to see it in all its glory very shortly, the Côte de Kimihurura contains a lot of cobbles and quite a long drag.
Oh yes, and including a ramp of 11% that you have to negotiate for a couple of 100 metres. Unfortunately, we have a non-starter here in Kuroma. As declared a non-starter, one can only guess what the issues are, but there's a bit of sadness about that. I always think if indeed you don't get to actually start for something that you must have been building up for an awful long time, there has to be a very good reason.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? And with a time trial, we sadly have seen that, where people are in big anticipation of starting and something happens, and once that slot's gone, it's gone. And yeah, that's mighty disappointing, especially at the UCI World Championship level. So yeah, very sorry to see him not start today. I think, yeah, there's so many elements to consider, going back to my point on what we see in the latter part of today's time trial course. Of course, 40.6 kilometres. And as we approach the end of that, we have the section of cobbles, and then once they're off that surface, there's more climbing towards the end, of course. And I wonder how much elements like tyre pressure have come into the conversations, because although it's late in the day, you do not want to fall at that hurdle by having any sort of technical difficulties on that run-in.
So our friend from Sierra Leone, it could be something just as simple as having missed your slot, and you're not allowed to indeed go beyond that. I believe he is the only rider from Sierra Leone as well, so it can actually just be nothing more than just having not had your eyes on the clock, as simple as that. It's brutal in that regard, isn't it? You're not allowed to enter the course if you're not on time.
Yeah, there's so many elements like that, isn't there, across our sport, and all the rules in terms of track cycling. We see it a lot in terms of whether you're allowed a restart or not, and there's perhaps more nuance to that. But I find that when new fans of the sport start exploring all these rules and things, a lot of people say, well, what do you mean they can't just start a little bit later, or they don't get an opportunity if they've had a problem? But it's not always the case, of course.
Indeed. Well, this man is here. Ghana's Victor Akpabli is Victor Akpabli is off the ramp. Next up, it'll be Florian Vermeersch of Belgium. And dare I say, that may well indeed be our early benchmark. However, having said that, Rwanda and their own riders have been brilliant. And when they give us their national champions, we have been sitting up and appreciating what they are delivering. The man from Madagascar here, Mohamed Fatih Hian Toa, is off and underway. I tell you what, I like this bike. It's not the most dialed-in time trial machine. We've talked about the different kits, but it's kind of quite sinuous and lovely, old school, like me.
And I think that's what we're seeing a display of here with this rider, is just look at the focus, the dedication, everything that he's putting into this ride, despite being on that start ramp, knowing that you're going to have the likes of Remco and Tadej later, who have got absolutely everything on their side, everything dialed in. But this rider is just putting everything in to getting the most he can out of himself, out of his equipment. And we're seeing a lot of that on display today.
I must admit, you know, my heart goes out to him. Different funding levels, of course, for different federations. Of all the sports, however, I've got to say that cycling is, in terms of its equipment, it's quite open, I must admit, to all. The variation between, let's just take motorsport for a moment, shall we? A regular car and indeed a Formula One car is an eternal difference between them. From the very best, from the very best of the shop-bought bikes to the pro bikes, there isn't that kind of void. So if nations get behind cycling, they can make huge vaults in terms of their delivery of success. You just look at a South American nation of Colombia, for goodness sake. The amount of stars that have come out of there. We have Eritrea and Ethiopia, of course, that are starting within Africa likewise. So it's a sport where it's easy to make big gains for not an inordinate amount of investment, and we love that.